All right, so this is another walk and talk. Just to kind of give an update on the state of technology of large language models. Since I've been recording some videos on my own sort of personal thoughts about how these tools are going to revolutionize not just my industry, but all of society, and in particular, how it's going to affect governments, I wanted to talk about some news that's been happening in the last couple of weeks. In particular, there's a new model that Anthropic has made available to very limited partners, mostly big IT companies like Microsoft and Google and whatnot, as well as the American government, at least at the federal level. I'm not sure if they've given access to it at the state level. But as far as I know, that's the only government that's actually involved in this. And that's the model is at least currently being referred to as Claude Mythos, as opposed to Opus and Sonnet, which are sort of their two brands of pay or free models that are the ones that the public has access to. So the big news that has been circulating was that this is the first model that they've announced that they haven't released to their general customer base, either through the paid or the free plans. And particularly the reason why, this is kind of the aspect of it that's been covered by the mainstream media, which is how it's been called too dangerous to release to the public, at least for now. And that's because it, at least in their internal testing, they found that it discovered and exposed a large number of what are called zero-day exploits across software, pretty much every operating system, every browser, and every major piece of business software that exists out there, including some like BSD, OpenBSD, I think it is, which is generally considered the most hardened and secure operating system out there. They discovered a 27-year-old bug, an exploit that could compromise the operating system. So they've been sharing this with some of these key players that maintain and own these different products, including some of the free organizations like Apache and Linux foundations, to try and find these exploits before they release these tools to the public, because the big danger that they're worried about is effectively it comes to an issue around cybersecurity and how up until now cybersecurity is something that, in order for somebody to find an exploit, you need to be a cybersecurity expert. And you need to have quite a lot of technical expertise to be able to find these flaws and exploit them, either for government defense or, in the for criminal purposes. And the barrier to entry for cybersecurity exploits has dropped significantly with this new model. And the fear is that if they release this to the public without these organizations getting early access to it, it could bring all sorts of chaos to all sorts of systems everywhere. Now, there's certainly some level of hype to this, as there is with any new model release. But as far as the benchmarks that exist out there for these tools, this model does seem to be a magnitude step up in comparison to all the other models that exist. Now, there's no secret sauce that Anthropic has that means that they have an exclusivity to this particular type of model. It's highly likely you'll see the same strength models coming out from OpenAI and Google, as well as some of the open source models shortly afterwards, especially out of the Chinese space, in fairly short order. So this is not a permanent restriction to these select group. This is you've got the clock is ticking, and every organization needs to rethink the way that it deals with security. So the thing that I wanted to kind of talk about is how government IT infrastructure at especially municipal, but also provincial and federal levels, is severely lacking in many areas. Now, not to say that every organizational sets of weaknesses is as alarming as every other one. I would expect at the municipal level in particular, there's a huge vulnerability to these types of attacks. But also smaller funded provinces like PEI, where there just isn't the economies of scale to be able to fund the IT infrastructure and the security knowledge to have proper policies in place to protect against these types of attacks. So we're in the fairly near future bound to see an acceleration of security breaches happening, both ones that will be advertised and ones that won't, across all major organizations, both public and private. This is another reason why I think we need to start thinking about how do we build systems that are where large language models and machine learning is at the heart of it, because there just simply aren't enough humans out there who can have the expertise and the knowledge to put in places the securities, assurances, and the protections that we're all going to need in very short order. And in some ways, the models actually have a leg up over the security experts, because most people that are experts in the security space are academics, and so they might be really good at security knowledge, but and this is just generally true of all academia, their expertise can be really deep but very narrow. The real difference between large language models as these tools get smarter and smarter is that they're not specialized smart. They have a wider and deeper knowledge base than any one human can possess. And it's that width combined with the depth that makes systems where those tools are at the center, as opposed to being dependent on human oversight and human implementation at every step. We just can't compete. We already can't compete. And the gap between what our current systems are capable of and what these tools are capable of doing, is that gulf is only getting wider. That's one area that we need to have these conversations about. How do we redesign our systems of government? How do we redesign our systems of media and information dispersal? How do we educate a large population of humans who at this point have very little IT understanding, and in many cases are quite hostile to IT in general, but especially to so-called AI? Going back to my where I talked about how media has shifted and degraded over time. And our media now is focused on attracting eyeballs in order to justify advertising dollars. That fear and anger, emotional appeals are the dominant form of news media. And that's going to harm us in larger and larger scales as these tools and their abilities outpace what our current systems are capable of responding to. If we don't demand a conscious shift in the way that we approach solving government and solving public education and this spreading of information, where we aren't prioritizing building agents and models whose explicit purpose is to protect us, to fill in that gap between what we are, both as individuals and as a species, are capable of, and what these tools in the wrong hands will be capable of doing. It's a race. And the starting gun sounded 3 years ago, and there's been very little movement on the side of humanity to try and respond to these issues in any sort of public way. Yes, there are efforts within governments at all levels to try to incorporate policies and regulations around the use of machine learning, but it's woefully inadequate as far as the needs that we need to really find solutions for and to discuss. You know, one of my thoughts as far as how do we foster better education, better information, a better discussion of ideas would be to look at doing things like public hearings, and ideally, this goes to one of my own personal experiences, borrowing from the IT world. One of the most interesting experiences I had early in my career was I went to, when I graduated college, I was a Java programmer, Java being a programming language that was meant for building primarily web applications, and dominated the back end of web applications for a good decade or two before Node and JavaScript and TypeScript kind of took over. And I went to a Java 1 conference in, I think this was 2000, down in San Francisco. And the real interesting thing about these conferences is that they had, so when you signed up for the conference, it started, well, actually, there was a workshop-focused approach that if you could start on, I think, basically the Monday, and it went through until the weekend, where I didn't go to that part. I just went to the weekend part of the conference. But for that one, there were workshops, classes that you could attend that would teach you about different parts of Java. It was split in sort of 3 different spaces. One was kind of the area that I worked in, which was web software or web development. There was also a desktop development, and then there was an embedded space for things like smart cards or industrial tooling, that sort of stuff. And throughout that week, as well as throughout the conference weekend, there were lectures that you could sign up for, and at any given hour they had these, they basically broke up the day into 1 hour, 2 hour blocks, and you could attend, you could schedule out your whole week, or your weekend in my case, for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I booked up all these lectures were sort of held simultaneously, and as they all let out at the same time, and then you go switch to the next thing, so you could always be in a different class. And then they also video recorded all of them and made them available online, so that even if you couldn't, if there was a conflict, you could still watch some of the other lectures that you missed by not being able to attend because you were competing with it. I have thought that that would be a really interesting approach around machine learning and artificial intelligence, to have a conference that you could actually break it down to sort of the different aspects of your life, so that maybe you're interested in health, or maybe you're interested in education, or maybe you're interested in I don't know, there's any number of subjects really, but the idea being that you could create these threads, and then it'd be a good way to bring people together and to just, they also had a exhibition floor where there were all these booths, and on the outside they had all the different Sun teams that were responsible for different libraries and different tooling and technologies that you could go and talk to the people individually directly. And then there were like third-party vendors that also had tables and stuff. So you could actually do something like that, say for a province, like PEI is a good example. Have like all the different departments of government have personal representation on the floor, have all these large nonprofits or different parts of the of public entities like education or municipal governance or First Nation governance. Bring everybody under one roof and put together a whole series of interesting talks on different topics, and have like threads that if you are interested in particular subject matters, you could just sort of follow that all the way through a conference, or you could focus on a particular area of the province maybe and have threads for those. So anyway, that was an idea. That's an idea that I've had that I think would be interesting to try and act on, especially around, I mean, you could do this around, it doesn't have to be machine learning. You could do this about just the way that government works, or the way that public services are available. But because of the timely nature of needing to understand these tools and to try and spread public understanding and dispel a lot of the fear and hesitation that people have about these tools, and try and demystify them. In order to do that on a large scale, I think a conference or some sort of formal gathering where you can kind of bring a lot of smart minds together and have interesting discussions and panels and workshops to help show people the power of these tools and the potential of what could happen, what could change in a positive way in their lives and in the making of our public systems into something more efficient, more lean, and that frees up the humans that are part of the system from the mundane and the repeatable tasks that we can now automate, that we couldn't automate in the past, and allow them to kind of refocus and look at how do we spend our tax dollars more efficiently? How do we improve our systems and our services without the extremely expensive cost of having to hire more and more people? How do we automate? What can we automate without taking away the fairness and transparency that should be built into the system, and in fact widen it? Because again, the big power of these large language models is once you've trained a model to be at the expert level of a particular skill set, that model can then be scaled up infinitely and replace all that knowledge that's currently requires expensive educations for every human that you want to put in. So anyway, I think that's a bit it for this video. I'll wrap it up and continue my walk with Nibbler, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.